The temple has been defiled. One of the priests has killed the other and chosen to abuse the powers granted him by his patron Asocra, goddess of the mind. He is using these powers of the mind to control villagers and travelers, creating his own mindless army. Welcome to the Modular DM, where I make everything from dungeons to taverns that can fit into any campaign or setting. I'll do all the hard work so that you busy, lazy, or new DMs out there can have a little bit easier time getting ready for your next session. On today's episode of the Modular DM, we're doing things a little differently and designing something more along the lines of an adventure module. However, if you're not interested in the adventure, feel free to strip that part of this episode away and just use the location and lore. This is the Defiled Temple of Asocra. So what we've already got here is the main room of the temple proper. This is where any practitioner who wasn't a priest of Asocra would come. These rooms that are down underneath are going to be the basement where most of the adventure, at least where the interesting environment would be. You can also see in that main temple room that there's a partition where we're going to put some pews and stuff where just normal people could sit, and then an area for priests to do their work behind the partition. Also, what's going to make this interesting, it's a really fun mechanic, is that because it's an abused power of the mind, as soon as the players enter the basement, they're going to feel magical fog come over their thinking. And whenever they exit a room and go into the hallways in the basement, we're going to have them roll a d6, and that's going to determine what room they actually end up in. So it's going to be a lot of looping back and forth because they just can't get past this magical confusion. If your players start getting frustrated, go ahead and just let them into one of the final rooms, and really I would make sure that your players, even if you roll a 6 behind the screen early on, I would make sure they see 2 or 3 other rooms at least beforehand, just to keep things interesting and still give them the sense of exploring. That first basement room is going to be the storeroom for the temple for the priests. It's going to have food, candles, that sort of thing. Anything that the priests would need just in their day-to-day life. The second room, a little bit further into the basement, is going to be the chambers for the priests. And we're going to change up kind of how we draw the stairs in this, because this third room is ideally supposed to be right underneath the shrine that's going to be in the temple. So like you can see, we're going to go ahead and add a spiral staircase down from the main temple, and then it's going to go through just this small little entry hallway into the storeroom. This third room is going to be what we're going to call the well room. It's going to be an underground spring or well that's feeding into a small fountain, and the fountain floods over onto the floor, making this really peaceful sounding and relaxing place to sit and meditate. There's going to be grates along the edge of the wall that drain into the inner sanctum that's beneath even the basement. Again, usually I wouldn't put so much work into coloring these hallways, but I really want to emphasize that sort of magical confusion or magical fog that the players are going through as they walk through these hallways. I would make it really just sort of rough-hewn dirt hallways or something. The basement itself is carved, with the exception of this room we're drawing right now, which is a natural cave that they encountered when they were building the temple. There are these small, like 6 to 12 inch wide tunnels that lead out from this cave and up to the surface, so that the wind blows over them, it plays them almost like a flute, making these really weird echoing musical sounds in this cave chamber. The practitioners and priests here believe that that is the voice of Asocra speaking to them. Finally here we're going to have the entrance to the inner sanctum. It's going to be a very sacred and protected place. I think we're going to go ahead and have a riddle as well, just this huge onyx or obsidian, just black stone door set into the far side of the room with maybe a meditation circle in the middle. And the riddle will be, Only when those within find peace within will the doors open and let them in. Pretty easy, I think. The solution here would be that all of the players and NPCs in the party would need to sit down and meditate at once. I think it'd be really fun to have it be an intelligence save and actually flip the modifiers, because the dumb barbarian who doesn't have much to think of and has a -2 to intelligence is actually going to have a much easier time clearing his mind. So I'd give him a +2 instead of a -2 on this roll. But the super intelligent historian is going to have a harder time thinking of nothing and just meditating. So his +3, I would make a -3 for the sake of that save. Just makes things interesting for the players. This last room on the far right that we've added is going to be the garden as well, that the priests maintain. It'll be mushrooms and underground herbs and stuff like that they're able to eat or drink or whatever, consume in one way or another, that have mental effects. You can give these to your players as sort of like a fun single-use magic item too, if you want to, but just sort of calming stuff, mind-opening stuff. I think it fits the theme of the whole temple, with Asocra being a goddess of the mind. Now we're going to go ahead and decorate a little bit. So we've got the pews coming into the temple proper. They could be pews made out of wood, they could be stone benches, however you want to flavor it. In my mind, I have this as sort of a Mediterranean temple out on the edge of the village, like you saw in the thumbnail at the beginning of this. We'll put a couple of braziers in the back with, you know, the fires, actual fire and smoke billowing out the entrance. Maybe some of the underground herbs that the priests grow are placed upon these fires to make them smell really good or have a calming effect on those who enter. I would say this top room should seem entirely normal, because the priest that has turned and defiled this temple needs to have people around so that he can manipulate them and control their minds. So it's almost like a trap. It should be really, really calming and reassuring, and it should be really difficult for a player, an NPC, or a traveler, or whatever, to notice that something is off here. And like I mentioned, in the back here, we're going to have the priest's work area. I'm going to put a rug. We're going to make it nice. We're just going to put a table here. I'm not exactly sure what I'd have the priests doing back here, but it makes sense for them to have a separate area that's still in the temple proper. We also see in those two, what would that be, southwest and southeast corners, I'm going to put 2 temples of Asocra. As far as the entrance to the basement here, we're going to have it blocked off with the door, because there's things that the priests would want to keep safe, they want to keep their privacy, that sort of stuff. I just think that that makes sense, and it also adds a little bit more tension to the adventure when the players decide to actually explore the temple, if they decide to actually explore the temple. And because the map's kind of screwy on how it got laid out, we're going to use these dotted lines to show how one floor connects to the other, and we'll color code them. There's only 3 floors, so it's not crazy for this specific location. Obviously, the red from the spiral staircase leads into this storeroom. The storeroom is always going to be at the bottom of the stairs, because this is when that magical fog first comes over all of our players. So this is always going to be room 1, but if they roll, or I guess if you, the DM, rolls a 1 behind the screen, I would have them come back here. Now, this room at first glance looks pretty plain. It's got crates and shelves and chests and all that, but that evil priest has hidden a specially trained guard mimic in this room, and it won't attack him, but attacks any other intruders. So that's going to set the tone for this dungeon as the players enter this first room. One very helpful thing about rooms like this as well is that if your players were ill-prepared, this is a chance for them to stock up. You can put stuff in here that you think your players might need that they should have bought in town, whether that's candles to light dungeons further down the road, or rations if you're playing the sort of game where you actually keep track of that sort of thing. Even rope and stuff would make sense to be in here. Extra clothes, firewood, really could be all kinds of stuff. But, you know, just if you don't want to kill your players and you want to make sure they're actually prepared, this is a good way to do it. And I'm going to go ahead and mark with a red X here where I would put the Mimic, just because it's a little bit further into the room and it creates space before combat begins. Or you can use it to create a false sense of security for the players while they enter and they look around, and then all of a sudden they come across this chest that either looks a little off, or just when they try and open it, it has teeth. Either way, you know, it's a fun way to run combat. Up next here we have the priest's chambers. Just going to be really simple. 2 beds, 2 like meditation mats or pillows in the opposite corners of the room, and then a personal chest for each priest. You can put whatever you want in here, amulets, maybe a little bit of gold, maybe, you know, a journal or something. I'm not entirely sure. That could also depend on how this is clicking into your campaign as well. Another thing that I thought to put in here but I didn't put on the map is just a small miniature version of the shrine to Asocra. Just basically take whatever's up there in the temple proper and put it maybe in the center of this room or something, because it is where the priests live. Room number 3 here, as I mentioned before, is going to be the well room or the fountain room. There's a large well or spring in the middle that's feeding a fountain. The fountain comes up and overflows off of sort of like a small dais or something, and it flows into the floor. The floor itself is actually flooded and draining out of, I put 4 grates on the map, but you could line all the way out of the room if you wanted. But it's draining out of these grates, so it's constantly covered with, you know, maybe a couple inches of water across the floor. And then I would have maybe 2 or 3 stones emerging from the water where the priests could sit and meditate. Really peaceful, calming, just the sound of the water coming off and hitting the rocks. And maybe you don't even have any light coming into this room. It's just very dimly lit so that you can focus on clearing your mind and focus on the sound and meditating. After the well room, room 4 here, is going to be what we call Asocra's commune. So it's a small cave room. It's got a single stone dais in the center where one could sit and meditate. And like I mentioned before, there's these small tunnels coming off of the walls and ceiling of the cave that lead out to the forest outside. And when the wind blows across them, they whistle and sing and make all kinds of weird noises. And this natural cave is believed by practitioners to be a place where the voices of Asocra can be heard by the priests. Almost like an oracle at Delphi sort of thing, but without gases from the earth getting you high. But still, similar idea. You're communing with the goddess through the sounds of nature coming in. And also, I'm going to put a meditation mat on top of the stone because you got to be comfy while you meditate. And I would say maybe this would be a place that the evil priest killed the other priest and he just left him in here. It really sort of solidifies the way that this temple has been defiled. Room 5 is going to be the garden, so I'm going to put these out. I think they're technically actually torches, but they kind of look like mushrooms. So it's going to be herbs and mushrooms and anything else that they could grow underground, roots of some sort or another. Maybe they glow. That'd be kind of cool. Just you know, for flavor to set the setting. Anyway, the priests are growing some sort of crop in the reaches of the underground part of this temple, and they've got some amount of mind-altering effects. You can just make it calming, you can make a +1 on wisdom saves, you know, for a duration. I would just treat this like, of course within limits and stuff that makes sense for the location, but just like single-use magic items that your players can pick up. You can have fun with that. Then we've got this last room, room 6, Path to the Inner Sanctum. The onyx door blocking the path forward with the riddle, only when those within find peace within will the doors open and let them in. I think that your players should be able to figure that out, but you never know with riddles. It can be a problem. If they really struggle, I might have them find a journal from one of the priests, either in the chests or on the priest's dead body in the commune. Just to see, you know. And then I also mentioned that idea about making the intelligence save where the dumb players are actually better at clearing their minds and the smarter ones have more trouble. That just seems like a fun little thing, but if it doesn't fit your group or you don't want to do extra rolls, obviously you can leave that out. Finally, we've got the Inner Sanctum here, so this is where the boss fight will be. This is where this all culminates. I guess technically they don't have to fight, they could reason. I love having those other options in my campaigns because it just adds so much more depth. I'm also not a huge fan of D&D combat, so having other ways out of encounters and other types of encounters makes for a much better experience in my opinion. So this, as an Inner Sanctum in a closed off area, would have been pristine. I think that a giant statue to Asocra, I think that there would be tables and incense and offerings and all that sort of stuff down here, and I would have it all be defiled and sort of ruined and moved out of the way when this evil priest Melsor came in and basically chose to use the power and the temple itself for himself. And to emphasize that, I think that it makes sense to put a big throne at the far end of this room where statues and flames and everything around him, so that, you know, you can just see very clearly how this priest has fallen away from the ideals that he promised to uphold. I'd also put several of his mindless slaves as part of his army or whatever that he's trying to build in this room. If there's combat, it'll make it more interesting because there's more than one enemy, and if there's negotiation, it's really going to change the atmosphere because the players will really be able to see how this priest is affecting the nearby villagers and travelers and really taking advantage of anyone else that comes through and past the Temple of Asocra. So that's about it. Really, we've already talked about the different opportunities for plot hooks and everything. This is more based around an adventure than I'd usually like to do because it limits how versatile it is, how modular it actually is. But I think that this little side adventure could fit into pretty much any campaign, so I hope that people are able to use it that way. Otherwise, I think that Asocra is an interesting goddess. I think that this is a good design for a temple. So if you don't want the actual adventure, please just take this out of it. I really want to continue making content that everyone can use in whatever way is best suited to them. I really just want to make an impact on any number of players, even a single player. It feels so crazy to know that for my last video, Elsior's Temple, or Elsior's Tower, that there are two separate people who already have said that they're going to use this in their campaigns, and I'm really excited to hear how that goes. So really, that's all I'm looking for. I want to make content that makes your lives easier, things that you're interested in. So as usual, if you have suggestions, please go check out the subreddit. Please comment on this video. Having an actual fan request for my last video totally changed the motivation, and I really just got sucked into it so much more. I had a lot more fun even than I usually do creating it, because I knew that I was doing it for a specific person. So I would love to hear your recommendations. I would love feedback on this design. If you use it, I definitely want to hear about it. And yeah, I really appreciate everyone coming to the video. Again, I'd like to send everybody over to Matthew Colville's channel. I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for him. He made a very similar video called The Delian Tomb that you all need to check out. Really, I watched that video, I used it, I loved it, and it made me want more content like that, and I couldn't find it, so I decided I was going to make it for other people. I really hope that you guys have that same experience with this that I had with that, although I'm not nearly as good. If you do drop by over there, tell them that you came from my channel. It would be really cool to be on Matt's radar. So anyway, guys, this has been Asocra's Temple. I think that it turned out very well. I think it's a little bit different, so let me know what you think about having something that's based a little more around an adventure than usual, because I'm open to doing it, but I want my content to still be as versatile as possible. So yeah, I appreciate you guys coming to watch the video, and if you enjoy it, please like, comment, subscribe. My goal is still to get to a point where I'm consistently putting one of these out every single week. So I would love to get your feedback and your support. And yeah, so thanks for stopping by.